So today we're going to talk about brand and brand building, namely how to create a love brand. A love brand differs from a regular brand because it transcends the regular buyer-seller relationship. It's really something where you have a connection, you can build a community, customers become advocate, and they really become passionate about your brand and they can defend it. So we're going to talk about what makes the difference and how can we go from a brand to a love brand by creating an emotional connection, exceptional customer experience, and authenticity and transparency. So why would we create a love brand? A love brand creates a lot of value on the long term because people are more loyal, they tend to be more forgiving, you usually have a premium associated with your brand as well. So this is, from a business perspective, the reason why a love brand is a plus. We can definitely talk about some. I would like to talk about Patagonia, for instance, which really had a cult following because at some point they were extremely passionate about environment, about preserving earth. And at some point, the founder even gave all his shares to a trust that will reinvest any money that is not used for the company into projects that preserve the earth, etc. So typically, this coherence between all touch points, this coherence in the story, the fact that there was a clear logic behind what happened and how people were addressing it, turned the company into more than a company that sells jacket. It's a movement. It's a purposeful venture, and people connect to this as well. So how do we create an emotional connection? You want to make your brand memorable. You want to talk to your audience. And the best person to tell you about that is Huda Baroudi, that I'm interviewing a bit later in the podcast today, so stick around. So how do we craft a brand story? A brand story usually goes back, and you probably heard about this book a few times before, to the why, the purpose of the company. So Start With Why by Simon Sinek is one of the books that we always recommend, which basically tells you that it's not about the product you sell, it's about why you're doing it and what's the purpose of your company. We have a more in-depth podcast on the mission, vision, purpose building of the company. But in a nutshell, the purpose is you need to clarify what you're selling. Why do you exist? What problem are you answering? And why and how are you changing the world? The mission is about the customer, but not the customer only at a demographics level. So am I talking, to ladies from 25 to 35? It's really demographic from an emotional standpoint, from a needs standpoint. So understanding the cultural context, the dreams, the fears, the needs of your customer database. And obviously this is much easier when we talk about maybe a retail brand or a B2C brand, but this also can exist with B2B, with services, with industries and products that are maybe less sexy than retail. The way to do that is really to answer a few questions. So, for instance, what do our customers fear? What do they want? What is important to them? What is their ritual, their identity? Are we solving a functional need, or are we really solving and fulfilling an emotional one? So once you kind of understand why you exist and what you're answering for your customer, you really can start crafting a story that is all about coherence and authenticity, and that is about an emotional connection, and it's about fulfilling a need and answering one of the fears or the needs of your customer databases. So you start by building a narrative that connects emotionally and consistently. So some questions to ask are, what stories are we trying to tell, and how is it true to who we are? Can customers easily retell the story? Is it clear? Is it crisp? Does it make sense? And does this story make people associated with it? Do they feel seen? Do they feel connected? Do they feel part of this story? Um, Once you have the story done, it's important to translate it into every single touch point you have as a brand. So it has to be the same in the product, with the community, with the website, and the tone of voice of the brand, and the visual identity, and the brand identity, and the words that I use, and the way I'm greeted when I reach a store. So making sure that every single touch point is true to the story, is really reflecting these values and this purpose that we crafted. This is what ensures consistency and authenticity. This is what ensures that people feel that it's true. It's something that we live by. And once you create the story, you can then move from having customers to having a tribe, to having a community. And usually having this community helps a lot from a business perspective, because also these become advocates. They're ambassador to your brand. They're not only guests that have a very functional transactional relationship with you. They're going to talk about it. They're going to want to push it. They're going to want to advertise for it. One big problems that we see with brands is how do we evolve? And we always have these questions with our startups. So startups, when they start, they're small. It's usually a founder in his room, in his garage, trying to make things work. So the voice of the founder is very loud, it's very clear, it's very present. But as you grow, it's either getting distilled or it might change. So it's really important as a founder to boil down what your story is about. And we're also going to talk about what is important, what do you stand for? And what you stand for will not change, it will not evolve. However, you can react to events in the world around you, to changes, to evolution, to competitive landscape shifting, to even trends, etc., without really changing the baseline and the guiding principle. So it's important to find this coherent base, but at the same time reflect what's going on around it. So for instance, Lego is doing really well at this. So they really embraced the pop culture while remaining true to their initial statement. So find this core that makes you who you are and let it evolve as you go without necessarily changing the basis of it. The toughest part about creating a love brand is the measuring part. So we know that, what cannot be measured cannot be done. It's one of the most famous sentences in business. But at the same time, emotional connection is something that is very, very difficult to assess. So how do we go about it? It can be qualitative. You do have some metrics that account for it, but qualitatively, how do people react to it? How do they talk about it? What's the customer lifetime value? Do I have sticky customer? Do they return? Are they happy to be here? Do I have a networking effect? So do people talk? Is there a word of mouth happening? So this is a sign of a love brand. You have the stickiness that happens. Are people more also forgiving, permissive when you do an error? Are they more prone to forgiving you and moving on, or will they just shift gears automatically? So these kind of behaviors are ways to assess whether you created something that is a love brand or simply a transactional buyer-seller relationship. So I think the best exercise for founders is really to think about some of the love brands and try to see what did they do right. So typically in Lebanon, when I ask the question of love brands, I get Almaza a lot, I get Xara, the Red Cross, etc. So I have a lot of brands that create nostalgia, that have been here for a while, that people connect to, that people feel seen by. So these brands usually stand out. When I ask the question abroad, we're definitely going to have Apple, which sells more than the product, that sells innovation, that sells this idea of community and belonging as well. You have Ben and Jerry's, that is very known for their activism throughout, and even more so now. So the fact that they're true to themselves today make them an authentic brand that you either love or hate, but that you have a relationship with. Today, I chose a brand that's very dear to my heart, Bokja. Bokja initially is a Lebanese furniture place, but it's so much more than that. I was lucky enough to work with them as part of the Fndng effort, and we worked on building the brand identity and understanding and boiling down all these efforts that were done throughout the years to some key elements. And this is very important. It's important to know that you can create your brand identity from the beginning, and you have to. But sometimes when you're going to start creating, you're just going to go. You're just going to start. And throughout the years, it's very important to go back to what you're creating and asking yourself the question. So the brand identity and the brand key core elements are things and workshops that you can do throughout the years to make sure that you're still on point, and to make sure that your team and every single person in the organization knows what you stand for, and knows that it's their duty, their responsibility to also convey it. So it's quite important to make sure that it's distilled throughout. So as I mentioned, Bokja is the company we're going to be talking with. They have two co-founders that are very vocal, that have very bold voices, and were not afraid to use them throughout the year. And they were able to create a community and an and almost cult following by being very true, very bold, very visible, and very unapologetic about who they are and what they stand for. So today we have Huda Baroudi with us today that will be speaking about the key elements of the brand. So for the practical part of the podcast, I wanted to host Bokja. Bokja is a brand that's extremely dear to my heart. I was very lucky to be part of the team for a couple of years and help with defining or boiling down some of the structural elements of the brand. It's a brand that started from passion by two co-founders that really wanted to express themselves, and they were able through time to articulate what makes them unique and turn it into a brand that will last and last and last. So today I have Huda. Huda is is the co-founder of Bokja. Unfortunately, Maria cannot be with us today, but I do invite you to go and look at their website and see how those two great ladies work together. Huda, thank you for being here. It means
My
a
pleasure.
lot.
You mean a lot to us, Carine. You really came into our lives at the time when we needed you.
I'm very happy, and let's talk about those times, but let's start even further back. So in the early days, you always talk about Bokja being a passion project. So what are the things, the decision that you took back then that are still a part of Bokja today and which guarantee this kind of authenticity and long-term coherence?
I think what sets us apart from other ventures is the fact that we stuck to our guns. We have been consistent from the first day we started.
100%.
We always followed our instinct, and we never were affected by trends.
Trends, yeah.
يعني from day one, we forged an aesthetic and we put it forward. And the aesthetic was novel. It had nothing to do with the ongoing trend at the time of less is more, minimalism, that was the order of the day. Every house was beige and what have you. We forged this aesthetic that was a maximalist aesthetic that was more is more. And being the two of us, two over the top women, we're free spirited.
I confirm.
We're free spirited. We don't come from a design background, so we didn't have that constraint.
Yeah, exactly.
And we had a lot of passion. We're passionate about everything that we collected at the time. From those who don't know what we do, we started off by collecting antique textiles that are very meaningful, together with vintage
Furniture.
With everything that we have amassed, we approach them not as because of how we approach things, because we have a freestyle approach to design. We didn't approach them as relics to be hung on a wall or put in a drawer. We rolled our sleeves and we went about creating with no constraint. And I think that's what gave us the sense of identity that you see now in Bokja. When we started, it was for one exhibition, that's it. We didn't plan to have any further plans.
Yeah.
But then the success that this exhibition, the resonance, the connection with the people kept us going.
But I feel there's definitely a unique aesthetic. And to your point, what I like about the unique aesthetic is the aesthetic itself changed, it evolved. We have new collections every year. But at the same time, it's probably your approach and the way you actually decide to design, this kind of free spirited approach, non constrained approach that remain constant. So you were able to, if you want, evolve, but at the same time, that there was an underlying overarching principle that remained throughout the years. So you recognize a Bokja piece, even if it might be a bit different, belong to a different collection, or
It's
be
so
different different periods.
It's so true. It was always about an assemblage of old textiles with new textiles, old embroideries with something that less valuable, if you want. It's always about making fabrics talk together. And then I will talk about this later. What helped forge this aesthetic was the advent of those migrants who added a layer to what we do that always
Elevated it, yes.
elevated this.
And what elevates, I think, Bokja as a brand is that it's not only about aesthetic. You talk about Maria and you being free spirited, but you're also activist. You're also very vocal about some topics that are dear to your heart. You've been very vocal on major crisis in
Exactly.
Lebanon.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned the migrant crisis as well. So I feel that there is more than just design to Bokja, right? And people feel that. It resonates with people. You talked about how you were able to create this connection. So what's this more? What's this thing that makes Bokja more than
I think this
a nice
more,
face?
this more came about over the years. In the beginning, we were passive participants. We would get those beautiful embroideries. We will find those beautiful finds in Basra. It's a nice story if you allow me expound on how this came about. But in the beginning, it was only an aesthetic enterprise. It was making the best of what we have, etc., etc. Basra at the time, in the 90s, was overflowing with modernist furniture because people, foreigners, left Lebanon during the war
And left
all
their
their
furniture, yes.
all their sarinen, all
Yeah,
their
yeah.
land. Basra was overflowing. This coincided with Uzbekistan at the time. No entry to Uzbekistan. You only enter if you have somebody inviting you. At the time, no tourists even saw the things that we saw. So it was really full of those fabulous,
Yeah.
bold embroideries and robes. So that was something that worked for us. But then this aesthetic journey took a turn. A few years later, and two things happened. The financial crash
Yeah.
that shrank our market because our major market was the United States, plus the copying that happened
Yes.
against Bokja. It shrunk. So our market shrunk, and we were forced to look inward and review what we were doing. And this coincided with the advent of migrant workers from the Arab countries. Arab countries, there was the Arab Spring happening, and many very seasoned craftsmen with their 100-year-old machines came to Lebanon looking for work. Of course, Bokja welcomed all of them, and that was a decision that was groundbreaking. Yeah, it changed. It changed a lot because it enabled us to transform our studio into a hub. It was a laboratory. It was we created an ecosystem that enabled an age-old craft to shine instead of being relegated to obsolete.
Old, yeah. Old.
No, it would have been obsolete.
Yeah,
Had we
yeah.
not looked at it and started dissecting it and contemporizing it. We gave it a contemporary relevance, and all of a sudden we found ourselves with a visual assemblage with embroidery, with a tool that enabled us to voice, and it enabled us to speak against all injustices, be it environmental, be it social, be it political. We were so engaged that you would notice that at many intervals from that time on, we would handle
have stunts, or you would.
We talked about the bees because bees were so environmentally precious to us, and we had this huge installation with Sotheby's in London. We talked about the Arab Spring, the Arab. It is hanging now in the Institute of Monde Arab. We talked about the circumstances that brought to us those migrants, the fact that we had time to spend and be engaged in issues around us enabled us to find that we have a mission. It is, we found our mission. We found our raison d'être of contemporizing an age-old embroidery tradition.
And this is quite interesting, Hoda, because basically what we're also telling our startup is you have license to evolve. You are allowed to find your voice as you go. You are allowed to change and learn new things and new skills. And I think, yani, having heard the story a few times before, I think the key thing is you were always artists, but they were very much in connection with what was happening geopolitically around you. So you were always kind of this voice that translated in a pretty aesthetic shape some conflict, some tension, some big questions.
It gave oomph
It gave oomph, and it was not only because at some point we were being described as the creator of nice surfaces, and we're not, or Bokja is not only creating nice surfaces, it's so much more. It has a voice, it wants to use this voice, and it is the voice of so many problems or issues, and it never feels wrong because it's really coming from your gut, Maria and you, right?
It's
so
very
you're
authentic.
allowed to speak about the bees as much as from the migrant situation, and still it would feel authentic to the customers or people who are seeing it because it is really something that you feel, right?
Totally. Actually, it hit us because there was a meeting a couple of years ago. We had a major meeting whereby we wanted to review some prints that we have had made. And we were later on, I mean, you will know if you know the story book that we are doing wearables. We started doing wearables like 5 years ago, like so. And we started looking at all our archival material and what we have produced and the engagements that we worked on. And we were hit by the fact that Boksha meant something.
Yes.
It meant something, and we promised ourselves not to let this be diluted. I mean,
This connection.
yes,
This
this
connection.
connection. I mean, growing the business sometimes can dilute issues like this. Can dilute because when you grow a business, you need to sell more, you need to find markets, you need to make it more neutral, if you want.
Mainstream.
So we really are now walking the walk where we really need to balance this.
And I feel for me, one of the moments where I felt the connection with Bokja is that you're capable of having this connection deja anywhere in the Arab world. So I went with you to Abu Dhabi. There was this connection. People understood the message. I went with you to Dubai. You had like this big, the boxing, punching bag, and people were pinning some problems. So you were able to create connection with people a bit all over the world. It's kind of a universal language what you've created, right?
If you want me to talk about our connection with people, I can tell you endless stories. One of them was actually, let me go to the very beginning because it's important, I think, to tell people who want to start something.
Exactly, that was my question. How can
Whatever you start with, it has to be something you're passionate about, and it has to be something that is that has a sense of novelty and boldness. And irrespective of trends of the time, you have to have really a sense of conviction. I think this is the driving force.
This is what also ensures coherence, right? Because if it's exactly, it's a relevance, it's a conviction that you have, and the rest can change. But if this conviction remains,
this is what will keep you
the guiding.
How Bokja connects with people. First of all, it was even from day one. I go back to the first day we exhibited what we got from Central Asia, and the connection with people was they were all awestruck. It was so novel, and it was so connected in stories, in history, in tradition that the connection was immediately there, and there was no going back to that. We needed to do another exhibition and another exhibition until we set up the company. But a moment that really comes to mind was in Quibroni. It's a museum in Paris where they invited us to talk about Bokja, to talk about our journey, and we prepared. It was Parsons University who arranged to be in the museum. So we prepared a long piece of fabric that like something like 20 meters, whereby we tried to incorporate in it all our techniques, all our stitches, all our embroideries, all our ways of manipulating fabric. So each piece was telling a story in its own right, and it stretched over 20 meters. And I really remember the moment when we opened it up, we rolled it on the stairs. People were crying. Some Lebanese people were crying because there were many untold stories also about Lebanon.
To go back to your point, this feels very pretty, very nice. But at the end of the day, do you make money out of it? So how can you exactly, you were talking about this balance between, always staying true and being very bold and vocal, etc. But at the same time, you're a business, right? It's not an NGO. So how do you find the balance between pleasing people and
Actually, it's a double-edged sword, what I'm gonna say, because for the longest time we were without establishing a company per se. It was me and Maya, four hands, two minds, two drivers, and we were doing everything on our own. That had its rewards and it had its biggest disadvantage. Uh, the fact that the first 10 years without a team, without a company, enabled us to execute this vision. And the reward was there because it was only me and Maya. But once you move on to build a team and make a structure and make a company,
there's
it's a
limitations?
completely different ball game. You have the limitations, and you have to think in you have to think completely differently. And that's what took us into Wearables, because we were looking to grow the company. We were looking for things that are scalable. Everything we did bespoke. It was bespoke, it was one off, it was a story, it was a tapestry.
Which took a lot of
So,
time of Maria and you became a bottleneck.
We became exactly. So the move from bespoke to scalable was not easy because you we had to be careful to make the transition without shooting ourselves in the foot. We have to make the transition without betraying our value system. We had to make the transition at the expense of diluting the messages that we've all made. We succeeded so much in building a very successful operation with the wearables. The wearables were a nice way of also preserving our major prints, because these were printed. They're printed and we have them forever. So now you have those old robes of our mothers printed forever. That's scalability for you. Now you have always got to be careful to walk the line and keep a modicum of balance between the you cannot sacrifice what you stand for, but at the same time you need to make money, and that's a compromise that we will always work on.
And it's also a compromise that's kind of doable today because Maria and you are very vocal, opinionated, and you are kind of making sure that the company remains true to itself.
Yes.
How do we ensure this happens after the founders decide to leave the
A
company?
key thing and a key advice for anybody who wants to start a startup is start by building a team that you nurture, that you educate,
Train.
that you pass on your creativity and make sure that take nothing for granted. But the team has to be nurtured so that you can confidently delegate. You start delegating, and then it's only then that you ensure that you can pass it on.
And the team, knowing the team at Bokja is not only technically good, it's also a team that's passionate.
They're all passionately implicated. And I mean, our design team, they bring issues on the table. They say, we have to talk about this. This week they told us the ships are going to Gaza. We have to make a whole week post. You're right. Let's do that. They go into the archives and they bring out many stories that were already concocted. They bring it back.
And what about mistakes? Is there any major mistakes that was a good lesson and that startups could learn from?
Of course, many mistakes. Things that we learned from that hurt was not to go for low hanging fruit. The projects that to give time to time, be patient. As you know me, I'm a person who
Slightly impatient, slightly.
So if I can only show you slides of what we collected in the first 10 years, if I only can show you. These things should have stayed in our archive. These things shouldn't have. I mean, of course,
Mm-mm.
in hindsight, we couldn't have maybe because this kept us going. But um, don't go for low hanging fruits. Don't go for quick profit. Try to build a long strategy and uh, build a team and go for the mistakes that happened in the first 10 years was we sold immediately, we were too impulsive and we sold treasures. That could have been part of our archive. I have to mention here that it's so important for defining a brand is to have something to fall back on. Yeah, you need an archival, strong archival support that you can delve into whenever needed.
And
It gives you
remember what.
a sense of identity. It anchors you. It is really our compass because every time we want to create anything, we go back, we feed from it. It shapes what we do, and also the fact that we're working with something that's been timeless gives us a sense of, we're true. I mean, it's something we're creating a visual language that will endure and it will offer people something nice.
So, if I were to summarize a bit what you said, I think there's this idea of archive and having this coherence throughout, which you get from going back to the DNA of the brand, going back to your initial passionate project. The second point is finding this balance between, business and creativity.
This is the two major
And always being true to both, right? So always making sure.
you cannot sacrifice the business.
Yeah.
Because the business is what keeps this, it fuels.
But I would go back to this idea of what kept you going and what is creating today this amazing community. So again, for me, when I walk the street of Beirut or when I go to Maison et Objet in Paris or whatever, people recognize you, know you, people trust you, trust your language. They like or dislike the visuals, but they have a very strong opinion towards the visual. It's not something that you look at and have no reaction to. And I think you achieve this by being very authentic, very true to yourself, and not shying away from being different, from maybe being against the market or being too bold for the market at times. So I think this authenticity, this I know, and this paid off because people
paid off because people in the design world paid attention.
Yes.
And I mean, in Design Miami, in Art Basel, that was back in 2008. What we showed in Art Basel back then connected with major design icons. Lee Edelcourt, New York Times ran a page on us. And although it was a major depressive year, our things sold out. What keeps us going now, I think, is the responsibility. It is unconscious. It's not that we are. I feel there's now a responsibility to keep going and to pass it on. We created. I feel, I mean, with all modesty, that we have created something that's unique. The tapestries that we've created we started doing the last 4 years in public spaces, sort of garnered a form of cult following behind us. We were able to put on textile, we were able to create a language that's very
Emotions.
particular and
Very emotional.
so now we have first of all, we have a company that runs 30 employees now, or 33. We have embroiderers that have been with us for the last 20 years. And together we created this, and they are now, they've moved up, if you want, in the social ladder because of us. They're able to send their children to universities, and we cannot stop. No going.
No going back. And we're very thankful that you feel this responsibility because we don't want you to go back. We're expecting a lot from Bokja still. Huda, any last words of wisdom for entrepreneurs that want to start their brand?
It's not a walk in the park.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, if you're not passionate, drop it. Because passion will enable you to keep going whenever you have problems, encounter problems. Having said that, passion is not enough. Passion has to be partnered with side to side with passion. You have to nurture resilience and discipline. Things that took me so long to learn, but this is so vital to the business. Um, and I would say, yeah, the team building. Team building is also vital. A clear voice. You have to have a clear voice. You have to be strong conviction, and you have to be consistent, because even if you feel that it's not trendy, it's not relevant at the time, if you really feel it, if you really, your instincts tell you keep going, create a structure to make it grow and keep at it, it will happen. You will find your place in this, under the sun.
Yes, so definitely a clear voice. For those of you who don't know Bokja, I invite you to go to their Instagram page. I absolutely love what they do. And I absolutely love Huda and Maria, which have been the passion and the voice behind this brand for the past 20 years now. Thanks.
25.
25.
I'm celebrating this year with a book. I'm crossing my fingers.
So thanks, Huda. Thanks, Huda Baroudi,
my
for your
absolute pleasure,
time.
Carine.
It was amazing to have you again, and looking forward to all the beautiful things Bokja has to say and do. Thank you.